arrived at Camp O'Donnell, which was one of the real terrible prison camps. And during the 2 months that I was incarcerated there, they buried 1,100 Americans and 14,000 Filipinos. In fact, death was a part of our life. They were burying 50 and 60 Americans every day. Every day, 50 or 60 Americans would be buried. And they didn't even have the decency of burying the men with any ceremony whatsoever. They just throw their body into a open grave like there was a piece of cordwood, and they wouldn't even allow us to arrange the body in any orderly fashion. But that Camp O'Donnell was a terrible prison camp.
And then you went from there to.
Then from there, they moved me from Camp O'Donnell to Cabanatuan, and here again, Cabanatuan was a very terrible prison camp. Again, they were burying 50 and 60 every day. And I was there for 5 months, and then they moved 2,000 of us to the island of Mindanao, to the Davao Penal Colony. And we were on board a ship for, I think, around 10 days. We arrived from the island of Luzon to the island of Mindanao, to the Davao Penal Colony. Then on the 4th of April of 1943, there were 10 of us Americans and 2 Filipinos that escaped from the Davao Penal Colony, and we joined the guerrilla forces, and I served with them until the 29th of September of 1943, and that's the time when the Bowfin picked me up off the north central coast of Mindanao and brought me to Fremantle, Australia.
And the commanding officer of the guerrillas, I believe, was
Commander Willingham. Commander Willingham.
The guerrilla forces.
Well, the guerrilla forces that we joined was under the 10th Military District, commanded by Wendell Fertig.
And how did he or those in charge of the guerrilla activities learn of the Bowfin or some submarine coming in?
Well, at that time, they did have transmitters, and they were able to transmit information to some agency in Australia. And the message went out that there were 10 Americans who had escaped from the Davao Penal Colony, and they had very vital information concerning prisoners of war who were captured on Bataan and Crigador. And they shortly thereafter they sent a submarine out and picked up 3 of our escapees. One was Commander McCoy, Melvin H. McCoy, who was a Annapolis graduate, and Steve Melnick, who was a West Point graduate, and my squadron commander, Ed Dias, and they named Dias Air Force Base after him in Abilene, Texas. And then it was shortly after that is when the Bowfin came in and picked me up.
And can you tell some of the highlights of your around 10 days time on the Bowfin as the Bowfin moved from Mindanao to Fremantle Harbor?
Well, I'd say it was probably the most exciting experience of my whole lifetime. I can honestly say that group of men who composed the crew of the Bowfin were the finest men that I ever met in my whole life. They were just beautiful people. The thing that really impressed me was the time when we sunk the first ship. The klaxon horn went off, and these men manned their battle stations. You could just see organization and dedication. They knew what they were doing, and they did it. They sunk the ship off between Borneo and Zamboango. I believe it was a combination troop transport and cargo ship. And then they got another ship in the Indian Ocean, which I believe was a communications vessel. Finally, we arrived in Fremantle, Australia, and they put me in a hospital there. And I believe it was the second night that I was in the hospital. Several of the crew of the Bowfin came up to see me. And that was in fact, it brought tears to my eyes to think that here are men that have been out on patrol for 2 months, and they would take time enough to come and see me in the hospital. I'll never forget that.
I was one of them roundheads.
Yes, I know. Reed was there, Bud Kanaki, and I can't remember the names of all of them, but they did sign a piece of paper, of which I believe I sent to the Bowfin Museum in Pearl Harbor. They have a copy of the list of people that signed that sheet of paper.
Will you repeat again just when and how did you learn that Reed Lee was a Bowfin crew member and that he was from your home area?
Well, as I recall it, and Reed and I think Reed's memory is a little better than myself, but after we sunk the second ship in the Indian Ocean, which we sunk with deck fire, we submerged, and while we were submerged, I was in the forward torpedo room sleeping on a canvas cot. And I went up to Reed and said, "Well, where are you from, Reed?" He said, "Well, I'm from Colville, Washington." I said, "Well, I'm from Spokane, Washington." My God. And then I believe that's when we got into a discussion. I learned that he was the first cousin of Ray Cantrell, who was a very close friend of mine in the Air National Guard, who later on became a captain with the Pan American Airlines. And of course, after I got home, it was quite a few years later, I had the opportunity to come to Colville and looked up Reed, and since that time we've been pretty close, and we've kept in close contact with each other.